So we have Damonde Shritter here with us. Good day.
Good day, mate.
Day, mate. You're my third interview on this
Oh,
series, yes, of Why Are You Funny?
this is a whole segment. You found two other people. Were
Yeah.
they funny before you interviewed them, or did they come in light
Well,
during the podcast?
Rick Bronson,
Oh, Rick Bronson. Okay.
that was one of them, and Ryan Patterson was one of them too. So,
Okay.
yeah. Um, so this is kind of, and we worked together just recently. I just met you in Vancouver, and we were talking a lot about, our past and how we got into comedy. So I thought this would be perfect. And we're going to start off like I've started off with all these interviews, wanting to know way back when, if there was a way back when for you, when you realized you made somebody laugh or you realized you might be funny.
Wow. How did you know what? There was a time, I'd say in about somewhere in like grade 2, where I guess I had heard some jokes that were maybe you shouldn't hear in grade 2. They were more adult jokes that I wound up repeating and doing like in the kitchen in front of my grandparents and everybody, and they laughed their heads off. They thought it was hilarious.
Okay, so something clicked in you. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I can remember doing it. I can remember telling the joke, and it was a dumb joke. It was about some guy who keeps going back to a store. Mr. Do you sell bird feed? He had a lisp, so I did it sort of in this character thing. And at the end, the guy never has bird seed. He comes back, and at the end, he says, "Do you stuff birds?" And then he says, "Then stuff this one up your ass." Like the bird died, but I guess I told it in the lisp and the whole thing, and they thought it was hilarious.
Okay, so from that point on, did it stick with you? Like, did you go back to school and try to make people laugh? Did you use it? I mean,
No, you know what? It wasn't like I was more of an observant kid. I was kind of quiet and worked on things, so I could do it, but I wasn't funny all the time. And then in about grade 6 or 7, I had about 20 something minutes of these jokes up my sleeve.
okay, so this is kind of weird because this is different than the other two guys I comics I interviewed. For you,
Yeah.
are you saying you actually at a young age thought to yourself, "I'm going to put these jokes together and learn them"?
I don't know why I was, maybe because that joke that I told made everybody laugh in the kitchen. And I just had this memory where I memorized jokes and I could sort of tell them, and I don't know. And then in about grade 6, people were like, grade 6 or 7, like, "Hey, we heard you're really funny. You got these jokes. Can you do them?" And then there was a bunch of people at this camp out, and I did probably 20 minutes of jokes. None of them were mine.
No, but that's bizarre though. So you sort of like you did your first sort of stand-up set, if you will.
Yeah, in a way, I had a routine. I didn't know I could do 20 minutes. I just unloaded all the jokes, and it was about 20 minutes, and everyone was roaring around like that at this camp out and thought it was hilarious, right? So
Now, you said you were an observant kid. Was there any sort of, why are you funny? Like a lot of people, they were teased or they were overweight or they weren't good with the ladies. Was there any sort of deeper level in terms of why you use humor? Or why you wanted to get in front of people?
Well, I didn't necessarily want to get in front of people. Like, I was nervous when I had to tell the joke to my grandma. That was the last part, was getting in front of people. I didn't like that very much.
Yes.
But I come from a family where my dad, my uncles, they were all really funny, a lot of teasing, a lot of laughing, a lot of like them saying jokes. So I sort of learned how to communicate in a funny way, when to get a line in that might be funny. Like, that's how you kind of got a little bit of the attention shifted to you when you're hanging out with this group of people.
Well, you sound like you're kind of, your sort of origins of humor come from maybe a well-balanced place.
I think maybe, like, I don't know. I mean, they drank. There was a lot of them, like, I'm sure they were all hammered around the table while I was in this comedy conversation. So maybe the environment was a little more unstable than, like you're walking into, everyone could have been pissed in the kitchen, right? I don't know what they were up to, but I'd stroll in and say a couple of things. And
there we go. That's what we're looking for. So you're raised by alcoholics.
Yes.
The only way you can survive is through laughter.
Yeah. You know what? Oddly enough, I got more funny when my parents divorced.
Okay, how old were you when that happened?
10.
Now, obviously it touched you, in ways, in multiple ways, but did it have an effect on your humor at all?
I don't know. I I think what it did was there was a time there where I was changing schools a lot. So I
Oh,
had to make new friends every like year and a half or two. I went to another school. And so I think to, be a new kid and fit in, I had this humor weapon
yeah,
that I could say funny things or do funny things. So I would get in that way. Like grade 6, I started making just a newspaper for the school. Like we just printed out, there was no newspaper, but the thing I wrote about this lunch hour fight, it was hilarious. All the kids in the school were like, when are you doing another one of these? So I'd make tapes where I'd pretend to interview, like, on my own, like I'd take albums and I'd interview Sammy Hagar. I'd set
yeah,
up,
yeah.
and then I'd play a clip of it. And I didn't realize that my cousin stole those tapes and passed them around to school. And they were those hilarious tapes that used to go around
Yeah.
people's school. So I was one of those kind of guys that I was always, and then in about grade 10, I was like funny. When I went to the last school, I went to high school as a funny kid. And then I did the big speech at the end of the grad where everybody comes and I had to be this historian. And then I was walking around town after that. People would be like, hey, there's the comedian guy, right? Like, so I was getting at about 17, 18 people in the city were like, you're the funny guy. And that's kind of how I guess I never thought I was funny. Like I didn't go around thinking, I never thought I'd do stand up.
Well, you're kind of saying in some ways you were labeled. They picked
Yes.
you. They labeled you like kind of, hey, you.
Yeah, you're the funny guy. That's the comedian. I was starting to get that sort of stuff.
And I don't think that's uncommon either. I mean, I think as kids and stuff, we sort of get, you're the jock. So if there's somebody that could be the most athletic person in the world, maybe they don't even want to do it, but they maybe through even their family, they kind of get, well, you're great at sports, you're going to do that. Or if you're a very attractive girl, oh, you're the pretty one, and it's not uncommon to kind of be put in those labels, whether you like it or not. I mean, in this case, you like being the funny guy because.
Yeah, but I never thought of it from that angle until now, Paul. That probably I got labeled that for being funny. Like people thought I was funny, and then you sort of maybe you start to think like, oh, how do I continue on with this?
Well, I knew a very attractive girl back in the day, and one of the things that was the hardest for her was she hated being the pretty girl.
Yeah, tough bear to cross. Cross the bear. What do you call it?
Like her other sister was a smart one, and it was sort of this like, well, you're so pretty though,
Yeah.
You're more than that. But anyway, I digress. But okay, and another not uncommon thing I think, even with not just stand-ups but even actors, I think is these sort of military babies or people that move around a lot. You hear that quite a bit with having to have something to fit in. So you have this kind of comedy mechanism or being able to act, be the moment, whatever new school that is, you're that person. So that's not uncommon either, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you need, most comedians have some disruption in their life. Something happened like that. So I guess it really, I think it comes down to like an attention thing. So if you're looking for some attention,
that's my next question. My next question is, because I certainly say for myself, I mean, I remember the moment I was funny and made some people laugh, and it was like, ooh, I like the attention, like I wanted the drug. So for me, everything I really do, including this interview, is all for, I'm very motivated by attention. Does that come into play? But you're also the observer. You're a great writer, so maybe it's less for you, or?
Yeah, you know what? It was when I started. It was definitely an attention thing. It was probably like, oh, I'm going to show them, like, I'll be a guy who made something from his town or whatever it was. Like, I liked the attention when I did shows in places and people would come up to me after the show and be like, hey, you were great. Do you want to come with us to this party? Where I was always off on the reservation, hanging out with everyone. I loved it. Yeah. And then it's weird. Somewhere along the line, it turns to like now when I do a show, I don't want to talk to anyone afterwards. I don't want to have them say anything. I don't like it when people are like, hey, you're really funny. I'm kind of like, now I'm like, okay, I do my show, head home, whatever. I turned away from needing validation or whatever. It's just sort of, I like it. I want it to work on stage. I like the show. I want it to work, but I don't need any new friends to be hanging out with. I don't go out and go crazy with them. If they're fans or whatever, that's fine. But I don't, in a way, I probably shy away from attention. Now I try and do it like Yeah, I don't like that aspect of it.
And what I'm doing here is interviewing comedians and sort of finding out why they're funny, and there's probably different types of comedians too. I mean, I was definitely a class clown comedian. Like I was the funny guy in the class and funny with my peers. But there's also another sort of type of comedian that sort of in the group or around other comedians, they're not funny. They hardly say anything. They're brilliant comics. So you kind of go both ways, can it?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. There's either people who are like, I was a class clown, he's just a funny guy. So that's how I wound it. There's a lot of guys who can just write very quiet introverts, but they're really funny because the way their mind's ticking on the inside, if they can express it,
yes,
hilarious. And then there's the third group of comics are just these complete weirdos that aren't funny, but come down because they need the attention. So here's an outlet. They try it for a while and then they disappear. But they come in full guns a-blazing, thinking they're going to change the world. And they're just like, oh, you're just a strange person.
Yes, yeah. We talked about that the other day when I was working with you, and I thought, geez, I might be that person. But then I realized, well, no, I've been doing it long enough now that I'm still around. So.
They stick around. The weird guys don't stick. They just don't fit in, and they've come down, but it never clicks. And some of them disappear quickly and others stick around for years and it just never comes around, and finally I don't know what happens to them. They sort of disappear from the scene, but now there is some strange tilted people in there.
You've done lots of stand-up comedy. You've toured all over Canada, the US. You've done tons of huge festivals, and you've also been in LA. And we talked about your Los Angeles stint. And was there a different kind of funny there? I mean, we talked about how much more of a business it was,
It's not a different kind of funny, but everybody that's doing shows with you are the funniest people from wherever they came from.
And are they? Was it really like that? There's a lot of funny people there.
When you're doing the Comedy Store, the improv, like when you're doing the rooms where people are actually, every night there's, scouts in the crowd, right? Yeah. There's people from Disney or Comedy Center. That group of people are really funny. There's still people in LA who moved there and have never really done stand-up and want to get it, but they're lined up for hours to get a 2-minute spot. They're at all these, they're sort of in a different group, but once you're in with everybody who's funny, one, they're really good. Two, at any moment, Tim Allen can drop by and decide he's going to go on. So there was one night where I was about to go on. Tim Allen drops by, pacing around. Oh, we're going to send Tim up next. So, all of a sudden Tim Allen's there in front of you. He's pacing around. He goes up, lays waste to the place. Everybody decides after that set they're going to go out, smoke, get a drink because they just saw Tim Allen. And then I go up from what was a full room to like 15 people, like, who's this guy, right? You're just an after-mint thought of, and that happens to you a lot. But the other thing is you don't, like, I guess the guys that are really established can screw around on stage, but you get into this, like, deliver your A material night after night, do these top jokes. Like, you're not making up much on the fly. You're kind of now almost more like an actor than a comedian. You're doing your signature bits and hoping.
You're auditioning, if you will, for the people.
It's very much a stand-up audition. Then there is still places you could go to Largo, and there are some outlets where you meet some funny people and you get a little bit of that. But when you're in these places where the management is like, tonight, Comedy Central's coming down. Can you do this bit, that bit, this bit? Sure. Wear that shirt. Make sure you. So you get a little bit of, you're managed. You're packaged, and you're kind of you're a product.
And I mean, I guess that's showbiz, right? There's a business side to it.
All the biz people are there.
Yeah.
You've got some of the show, but there's a lot of biz people who are like, hey, we're going to turn you into a monetary sort of thing. And my hat's off. If guys can get through it, fantastic. But it's really tough and a little soul crushing to do it night after night.
When you do a show in like Brandon, Manitoba, is there a lot of people in the biz there?
No, none in the biz. Nobody knows what's going on. There's not one in the biz. Even the guy who booked the show is not in the biz.
They're so far from the biz.
Yeah, they're so far from the biz. They're in Brandon, Manitoba. They couldn't be further from the biz.
So you're in Vancouver. I'm in Vancouver now, and you mentioned before when we were talking that you're doing, you do some script writing here. Is it hard to be funny writing a script as
Uh,
opposed to performing a joke you wrote?
yeah, you have to. It's another thing to learn, but the thing about writing a script is comedy. They say is 90% timing.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of what's interesting. Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
yeah.
You know,
So when you write a script, you can, as a comic or funny people, can see how it sort of plays out. Like if you
sure.
play this, these are going to connect and be funny, and a regular person reading it might not read it funny. They can interpret it any way they want. So I've had some guys that are like, well, I just don't find this funny. And then I do the joke or play, like I'll write out a bit that I've done and they don't think the bit looks funny when it's written. Then I'd say it in front of them and they think it's hilarious.
Yes.
So often in a script, what's frustrating is you get down to this point where you're like, oh, I'm just going to throw in this hack line. What you think shouldn't be in the movie is like, oh, I'll just put this in. It's stupid, whatever. And that can often turn out to be their favorite part.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's the one thing I wasn't sure of.
I remember hearing an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and maybe even Sylvester Stallone was talking about it. But it's basically catchphrases, and they said, when they read these scripts before, nobody picked out, I'll be back. Like there was zero sort of radar on that. Like, oh, that's going to be this line that people are going to. They had no clue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's weird that way, and it's just I got good advice from a guy who has he's written and directed a number of movies, and he came up with like George Lucas and Harrison Ford and all these guys. He's in American Graffiti and that, and he told me, he's like, just remember, like when I started writing scripts and showed him some, he's like, you're writing for bankers, remember that. So put in like more information. So he's like, whatever in this pile, there's a banker guy who's going to decide. Like, don't think they're going to necessarily be like artists like you and I.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So he said he can read 10 scripts. He might pick the worst movie ever written in here, but if he can picture it in his head and understand it, he's going to go with that one. You could write, there could be the greatest movie ever in this pile. And if he can't see it.
Yeah, if he can't feel it himself or understand it, it's
Yeah, so you're always told, like, don't put direction in, don't do this, that's for the direct. Like, a lot of the stuff you're taught in script things turns out to be like, yeah, that's in the Hollywood thing where there's already readers that know how to write them. But if you're new and getting in.
Do you think, we're talking Why Are You Funny? We're talking about your past and what you've done and different things you've done. Do you think, because I know you've done acting, I know you've done writing, I know you've been on stage, of course, at stand-up. And do you think comedians make good actors?
I hear that they do. And you know what? Because I don't have a bunch of acting training. I did play that. But when I get a part, like in a movie and that, like people are like, you're kind of a scene stealer.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? With comedians.
Yeah, and they're not always sort of hilariously funny, but it's weird. I did this, The Dog's Way Home, and the director guy was, he's a pretty decent director, and another actor that was in the scene with me, his friend, he's like, hey, did Charlie, the director, say anything about me to this friend? He's like, no, but he raved about Damonde. He was saying how great he was, right? And this guy has done like 140 the actor guy had done all this stuff, and this was like my first one in 3 years. And so great. I think we make good actors. I don't know about the some of the emotional stuff. Like I never had to do like a big crying scene or that. I'm sure comics are good at the angry scenes. You look at Adam Sandler breaking stuff and freaking out.
I could see that. Here, I'll finish off with this question. Who do you think are crazier or more, off the rockers, actors or comedians? I'm gonna say actors.
I'm gonna say it's a weird talk. Like here's the thing with the comedians. When I started, way more off the rocker. It was more of a drinking, crazy, rambunctious. Like they were rebellious in that. And now there's a lot of comedians that are kind of, I'll say, nerds. They've come from a different type of generation where they've watched stuff. They come in and they're a lot more like do the show, go home. They're not out drinking and wrecking stuff. So it's changing. And actors, I'm sure there's a lot, but like I know there's a lot of actors that because they got to go into those weird emotional things. Like I was just watching the thing on what's the movie of brought the Shia LaBeouf's how his dad raised him and whatever. And you see like, oh well, these guys are wired in this weird emotional thing where they can just go sideways, and I guess maybe they have trouble getting out of it. So I think actors are a little bit more dual personality.
I was gonna say you have this, you're who you are, but then you're so good at being everybody else. You can see how you could lose yourself. Where I think it's comics are more in line with who they are.
Well, Seinfeld had a great quote about like actors want to be somebody else and comedians just want to be themselves.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? Like
Great.
You just want to be yourself when you go out there, right?
Well, listen, Damon, I appreciate it, my friend.
Well, thanks, Paul, and good luck on this.
Oh, trust me, this is gonna be huge.
Yes, I can see it in your eye. I can see the commitment. I can see you wore your best shirt.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Commitments here. Okay.
This guy means business. I knew it right away as soon as the Zoom call came up. Like, this thing's gonna be big.
Yeah. All right, my friend. We'll talk to you.
All right, Paul. Take care, buddy. Good talking to you.
Bye.